Hi. We'll let the live stream run for a minute here, just so that people can tune in. If you could retweet the live stream link, that would be helpful. I know there's at least a half dozen people. It should be on the Work Hard Pittsburgh Twitter account. I know there's at least a half dozen people that are tuning in this way. So, yeah, retweet that so folks can find us. I know everybody in here, I think, except for our new friend, UI UX guy. Say hi to him. He's new. So yeah, the point of today is that a lot of you know we've secured some funding to seed an investment fund around the co-op. So we have a little cash to invest in your projects this year. You also know, most of you, that we're in the process of doing a ginormous real estate deal up here that would secure about 27,000 square feet of space for us. And in that are all kinds of decisions that we need to make as a community, but more importantly, we need structure at this point around this community so that everybody knows the rules of the game. And that's been our criticism of the entrepreneurial space at large in the region, is this lack of transparency, for a better word, right? A lot of people have silos of capacity, and how those silos operate and the rules by which they operate by are nebulous at best, if not outright purposely obstructionist. So we want to make sure that as we spool this up and figure out what it is that we become and what we look like moving forward, that everybody out there in internet land on the YouTube has a chance to contribute, but also you guys that have been with us for, I don't know, a couple years now, also are treated equitably and fairly. So I'm going to talk about a lot of boring things for about 9 slides. And then I'm going to open it up to you guys to kind of help us make some decisions about the structure of membership to the future cap table of this cooperative that will be structured like an LLC. Yeah, exactly. It's going to get that boring here in a couple of minutes. But in all fairness, we have to put this all out to the community in a transparent way. So some of the boringness is just going to happen. So Michael, I'm going to switch the slides. Thanks to Mike and Sorgatron Media for doing the live stream. And I'm going to drink a beer while we do this tonight. So we're calling this the Cooperative Structured Business Incubator, right? Because there's many business incubators in town. Almost all of them, I think, are structured as nonprofits. You could argue that C-Leveled, when it was doing business incubatory stuff, was structured as a for-profit. But I don't even think they're doing that stuff anymore, are they? Do you guys know? Anybody know? So what we want to do is provide a structure and framework so that everyday people can find capacity and sustainability for their business in this larger idea of a co-op. So we're going to create a model where anybody, regardless where they are in their entrepreneurial journey, can drop in, become an active member of the co-op, and find mutual benefit. And then people that are further along, right? People that have already done a startup or in a startup that's generating revenue will still find value in having this extended community that can support them and help them scale. So there are kind of four bullet points of things that we think have merit and value in this structure. And that's shared resources, access to capital, ability to acquire and develop talent, and find cost savings in a community-owned physical space. And if you think about our trajectory over the last year or so, we've sort of accessed all 4 of these points in one way or another. With where you're sitting right now, this is Academy Pittsburgh, and this will crank out about 60 junior-level developers, full-stack developers every year. And that's capacity that as a shared community, we can leverage, right? You can imagine scenarios where Jason, who's full of creative ideas, comes up with an idea for a startup, but maybe Jason doesn't have a lot of money. I mean, look at his pants, right? So Jason needs front-end web devs. Rob's sitting right back there. He's one of the folks that's in Academy Pittsburgh. The co-op can provide a structure for that deal flow. The co-op can provide a way for Rob either to be compensated through cash investment from one of our multiple pools of revenue that we're generating, or Jason can pay a subsidized rate, or Jason can make a side deal with Rob. But the co-op should be able to provide some structure for these kinds of things to happen. So we're going to kind of go through all of these bullets and some more before we turn it back over to you guys. So in thinking about this over the last couple of years, you know, we've carefully sort of looked at the ecosystem and thought about what was fair in the ecosystem and what perhaps wasn't so fair. What does it mean to be an entrepreneur in 2016? Does it always have to, does the deal flow always have to be structured the way that West Coast deal flow is structured? If you're going to go into an incubator that is essentially a B Corp or social impact incubator, should you be burdened by sort of the pitfalls of dealing with a large bureaucratic nonprofit? So we tried to look at sort of what were the pros and cons of nonprofit incubators and what were the pros and cons of for-profit incubators, and come up with a model that was going to take the best from both and get rid of the junky stuff that most of us have experienced, and probably Joel has experienced a lot, right, out there in the wild as they've started up their startup. So let's look at that critically. So there's a bunch of nonprofit business incubators in town. They are like UPMC, nonprofits. Oh. And there's upside to that, right? Like a nonprofit business incubator has a mandate from their charter, from their mission statement, to do things that are ethically correct, right? They have to have some sort of social or regional economic benefit. They have to successfully access foundation money, so that means that they have to have some kind of reporting metric. They have to show and demonstrate that they've been successful in some regard. They require all sorts of collaborative efforts around the community. They try to loop in lots of different resources all into one space. And they also may or may not consider sort of equity, making sure that everybody has access to resources to start their business. Not just CMU kids with fancy degrees that want to do web startups, but everybody. Most of us in this room, right? Most of us in this room aren't looking to build $150 million companies. And there's very limited resources for people like that in the city, and that's what we're trying to fill the gap with this model. But there's also a downside to having a nonprofit. Hi, Mike. Mike's waving at me in the back. You okay? Nope. Nonprofit structured incubator, right? Bad size is it kind of redistributes the economic energy of the entrepreneur back into that nonprofit entity. And this has been a big complaint of ours over and over again. This idea that you're going to go into an incubator, you're going to work your butt off, you're going to put $100,000 of your own capital into your business, and then if you fail, what is the output? What is the value proposition that you walk away with? You don't walk away with really anything, right? You walk away with an experience and maybe some lessons for the next one that you have to accomplish and tackle, but you don't generally have anything physically of value that you can hold and say, well, my business didn't work out, but at least I have this other stuff. So in this cooperative structure that we're proposing, we're trying to answer that question. Businesses are going to fail, right? Like businesses are just, some of them aren't going to make it. But shouldn't the energy that you put in, shouldn't the capital that you put in go somewhere that builds other capacity that you can leverage? The current incubator system around the country, not just here in town, doesn't really address that. They just call that the risk of doing business, and they just want you to assume that that's normal and okay to not have those systems in place, sort of a safety net in place to catch you when your business fails. We think with this cooperative structure, we can build in some of that capacity. Oftentimes, these nonprofit incubators are top-heavy, right? They're run by people that pull large salaries out of the system, and those people may or may not have relevant experience when it comes to business. That turned blue again, didn't it? Psychic. Scary, isn't it? Oh, I knew that. It's still blue. Damn it. I don't know why it's doing this. It's mad at me. There it is. I think it's this big, heavy thingy-majig we got here. And oftentimes, because of this fantasy of West Coast entrepreneurship that has funneled through our culture, they're often interested in these high-risk, high-reward propositions. If you think about the venture capital model of investing, right off the bat, it declares that 9 out of 10 of you are going to fail as entrepreneurs. And so the one of you that's successful has to kick ass. You have to make 30x, 15x, 20x, 10x return for that investor for their model to make sense, add up, and cash them out in a way that they make a profit. Again, we don't think that any of that has to be true. We think that you can be a 4x entrepreneur, do a great job, occupy an office space or a warehouse in your neighborhood, and contribute to the economic power and economic sustainability of your entire region. And those are the kinds of things that we want to provide access to. And also, I'm on the wrong slide actually. Went too fast. So that in general is kind of that whole nonprofit business incubator, and what we see is the good and the bad. Now, on the other hand, you have these guys on the West Coast that doesn't really apply here to Pittsburgh, right? You have big things like Y Combinator and large investment funds that spool off incubators like Techstar that will give you lots of money up front if you go through their system, and in exchange, they take a chunk of equity, they put people on your board, and they control sort of the path of development related to your company so that they can have their Series A, Series B exits down the road. There's good things about that. I mean, as much as we joke about capitalism here in the community, I mean, capitalism has worked in some regard for the last 100 years. It has created a whole lot of wealth across the planet and has lifted people out of poverty in a way that's measurable and useful, right? But that said, now it's time for capitalism 2.0, right? There's an opportunity here as people become more mindful about the downside of that to learn and to iterate. But there's still things that you can pull out of that system that are really useful, like being nimble and single-minded, like really kind of thinking and focusing on the task at hand, which is acquiring customers, generating revenue, and making some money, right? Oftentimes, these West Coast incubators have a lot of cash on hand, so they're not, for lack of a better word, they're not dicking around giving you 25 grand. They're going to give you $250,000, 350 grand, and give you an actual honest chance at having some sort of meaningful startup, right? And they come with a network of sophisticated people. But here again, there's a downside, right? Like, if you think about where your economic energy goes when you participate in this or when you wipe, right? When your business fails, where'd all the capital and time that you put into the system, where's it go? Who does it benefit? It benefits the people that are operating those organizational structures. And in this case, it's the fund. It's the VC or the angel or the employee of that organization that is existing to operate in that model of 9 out of 10 of you fail, one of you are successful. There's really no interest in impact or equity. Nobody cares about helping everyday entrepreneurs. Nobody cares about sort of the impact that their model has on neighborhoods. They're only interested in sort of high risk, high return investments. And like I said at the beginning of the slide, that they're really only, there's nothing in Pittsburgh like that. Nobody in Pittsburgh has that kind of liquid capital to do that kind of stuff. And if they do, we haven't figured out a way to unlock it. So what we're proposing is, again, things that pull the best thing out of there and ignore the worst parts of both of those models. We want this to be equitable and impactful. We want to be mindful of our neighborhood. We want to be mindful of developing the talent and businesses that are in our system so they can be good stewards of their community, right? We think that this model can pool a variety of different capital sources into one place, and we're already demonstrating that. We've already got a chunk of money from 2 of the local foundations to seed investments in what you guys are doing. And we think it's just a matter of tweaking the narrative, and this is one of the things that you guys can help me with, so that private capital in town sees the value in this kind of economic redevelopment. So rather than putting $50,000 in one high-risk, high-growth startup, why not put $5,000 into a fund that will help sustain a startup or a business that's interested in being in Pittsburgh and occupying office space in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh and being part of the larger community. We think we can go blue again. I gotta figure that out, huh? This is the first time I've plugged anything into this Mac, so I don't know how it works. We think we can answer this question of relevant business experience by staffing it with the people that are in the community. Let's try this. Whoa. So one of our criticisms of who runs incubators in town is they haven't been in business in 20 years, right? They're former business people that maybe don't quite get the things that you guys are encountering as you go out and try to compete in this very noisy environment, right? They probably don't really understand MetaMesh. They really don't understand the cultural movement behind a startup like MetaMesh, right? They don't understand how millennials think differently about the culture of of startups, but also just generally about community. So we think that in this cooperative model, you can have synergy and overlap between these different kinds of people that create more relevant experience. We think that the mentorship can be pulled from within as a collective body of knowledge. And we do this every day at Work Hard Pittsburgh, right? Like, we as a community support so many divergent things that are growing in that ecosystem already. Everything from creative talent, like Ryan and Buzzy, to really sophisticated technical talent with like Rob and what's going on here at Academy Pittsburgh. So there's a chance here to be self-sufficient. There's a chance here to kind of internally fill all the needs and gaps that happen to come up as you do business, right? As a co-op, we can invest in all kinds of business because we're not interested necessarily in getting a 20x return. We're just interested in sustainability and making that sure that any investment funds that we have get replenished so that the next round of entrepreneurs have access to that same kind of capital. And so we can do things like convertible notes that have really favorable terms to the entrepreneurs and systems. We can do microloans like Kiva Zip, but at a much larger scale. When we could do it at 5% or 8% interest rate, just so that fund gets replenished over time, just so that there's sustainability. But we can also attach all these other flexible repayment terms that scale with revenue, right? Like, if you are in a cyclic business that maybe in the winter doesn't do as much business, like this Adam shaking his head back here, then we can reduce your monthly payment as a collective, as a community of entrepreneurs. We can understand the need for flexibility in these sorts of things. And as long as we replenish those funds and continue to grow them, then we'll be able to provide so much capacity to so many different kinds of people.
Is CBSI community structured business?
That's very good, yes. That's exactly what that is. Thank you. CBSI, thank you. We can set limits to salaries, right? Some of the executives directing local incubators pull close to $500,000 a year in salaries. That's a lot of money. Adam, what would you do with $500,000 of investment? What would you do with $400,000 of investment? A lot.
Pizza
Quite a lot.
every day.
Pizza.
Yeah.
Brakes on your car. Yeah. So, as a cooperative, we can be very thoughtful about that. People running it, the people that are salaried positions in that cooperative, they can just pull reasonable salaries. And they should be doing it because they're investing in other businesses that are starting in that cooperative. So a good example of that is me, right? Like, I have investment, us, I guess, right? Well, I'm married to her, so she gets drug along regardless. But we have investments in Bangladesh, right? We have investments with Looking for Group here at Academy Pittsburgh. Like, we have 4 or 5 things that we've invested in over the last year or so. That may or may not work out. It's okay. But those should be the things that drive my personal wealth. It shouldn't be the salary of me opening the door or cleaning the bathroom here, right? Like, that doesn't have to be, if we're good at starting businesses, right? If the co-op's doing what it's supposed to do, if the incubator is doing what it's supposed to do, then I shouldn't need to pull a $500,000 salary. I should be able to invest my own personal capital back into the businesses that I'm helping and see their success. So I think that's a really important point, right? We can risk mitigation for all you guys. And this is the big one, right? This is the one that I really want to drive home because I feel like I might have lost it on those first 2 slides when I was fidgeting with my blue screen. But when you start a business that fails, where does that economic energy go? If you're in a traditional business incubator setting, it just evaporates into the air. He knows this because he's got about $150,000 in a business that just evaporated into the air, right? So this system, if your business fails, at least you have something else. You have shares of the co-op. You have a community that you can move laterally into, so you can find other people that are running businesses that you're interested in and slide into roles there. You have revenue that's generated from the co-op because of sort of the digital services that we do. You have other opportunities already built into this community that's propping you up. And so that's the real impetus behind building something like this. It's risk mitigation for everybody that's in this room. When Epicast makes $150 million, and who can I pick on? Colleen's business fails, at least she has shares in the co-op, and by proxy has some investment in Epicast. Right? So that's kind of the bigger issue. Okay, let's not go blue again. I'm almost done with this, I swear. Too long, didn't read, right? So we as a community can take products to market, right? And we can do it with a set of rules that allow us to share structure and capacity and organization. So collectively, we can launch things. We can launch involvement. We can launch Jason McCoy's new game. We can launch David Tusik's eye-level ads, right? We can launch Nick's next coffee shop in a different neighborhood. Like, we as a community can figure out structures that allow us to invest capital when we need to invest capital, find in-kind services to provide to each other when that's appropriate, and everything in between. It's too long, didn't read. To get that, never. So we're going to go real quick. So where are we going? So brief history of us, for those of you that don't know. We had a failed web startup in 2011, and then we had the hardware store, which is just co-working, and now we had like co-working plus in 2013. A lot of the revenue that we generate now is through digital service work. We've passed about 300 grand of digital service work back into the community by writing grants and answering RFPs and doing kind of all that sort of digital work. And then you guys are often the recipient of those subcontracts. We've subcontracted Adam and Buzzy and Ryan, not Brian yet. You're high on the, I don't know, you're high on the list. Knowledge, right? Jason, we've subcontracted Jason on some stuff now. So it's another revenue stream, another way to think. And so now, in 2015, how do we formalize all that? How do we get it in a legal structure that spells out when membership starts and ends and who has equity and how many shares do they have and how do they earn those shares and how do they vest and how do they pool distributions from those shares and who has access to investment funds, who has access to in-kind contributions from other community members. These are all rules that we have to figure out as a community. I mean, Jason and I can make them up, but you're generally not going to be happy with what we make up because we're selfish and we want to benefit financially from the system as much as everybody else does. So you guys have to actively be involved. So this is the poorly rendered diagram that kind of explains it all of what's going on right now today. Like, this is what is happening today in the whole model. At the top of the pyramid is the co-op. It's a co-op LLC that doesn't even exist yet, but it's funded through some foundation grants to start, and about half of the legal work's done. So we have an operating agreement draft, and we just really need to buckle down and get that into the state system to form it. And then all of these other lower blocks represent side deals that are already going on with this future co-op that doesn't exist yet. But they're promised to happen and fulfill what happens in the co-op. So you guys know Looking for Group, John Lang, right? You know that Hillman gave us a chunk of money to renovate the room that you're sitting in and to launch a full stack web developer boot camp. This place generated about 25 grand in the first session, and we expect it to generate 50, 75, 100 grand every time we put one of these sessions on. So every year, this room that you're sitting in is going to generate between 100K and 300K of revenue. And that's roughly $100,000, $150,000 of profit. So that profit, at least half of it, right? Because Looking for Group owns half of this with us, or will, right? Half of that profit could go right back into the co-op. It could pay for utilities, it could pay for toilet paper. You guys use a lot of toilet paper. It could pay for beer, or it can go into an investment fund that seeds Buzzy's Facebook ad buy next year, right? That takes MetaMesh and salaries Adam for 6 months. Neighborhood Allies and Birmingham Foundation have already seeded an investment fund. We have $100,000 sitting in the bank right now that we can give out to the community. So the rules behind that allocation, who's eligible for it, who's ready to go from a business perspective, you know, those are all things we have to work out yet, but that money's there. This relationship is already there. Now, this probably isn't a big profit generator, right? Like, this is that 8% return on investment. Maybe it's 5% return on investment. But it's showing that the community at large especially the public sector, especially the foundation community, is interested in this kind of real economic development. And we expect that private capital is going to follow. We think that there is a class of progressive, wealthy individuals in the city of Pittsburgh that are going to see the good work that you do and realize that the risk associated with throwing $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 into this fund is small, right? They're not going to make $1 million on you, but they're going to get their money back over time, and that should be enough of a story to make this happen. And then here's Startup Deal LLC. I mean, that could be any of you, right? That could be Adam giving 5% of MetaMesh LLC into the co-op so that he has access to a certain amount of capital. That could be Bits to Pieces 3D Printing, who's not in the room, but who David and I have been working with, who has essentially a 3D printing model similar to Xerox. Remember, like in the old days when you had Xerox machines, you would lease a Xerox machine, and a guy would come out and he'd put toner in it, and he'd unjam it when it was jammed. He's just doing the same thing with 3D printers. It's probably never a $150 million company, right? But that's a company that can make money, that can be sustainable, that can pay salaries, that can pay a return on investment for the co-op. So put your startup here, but also put yourself up here at the top as a shareholder of the entire entity. And then this real estate deal that we're going to do will fall on the old LLC that's existed through all of this, people that have already given Jason and I cash money as investment and have already contributed in-kind services. But even in this deal, right, maybe Red Blue Voice ends up with 50% of the holdings and the co-op ends up with the other 50%. So as a member of the co-op, not only do you get the benefit of all this collaboration, you're going to own the physical space. You're going to own shares that allow you to own the physical space that you're in. You're going to have real, physical, tangible assets that as a community, once it's paid off, we can do all kinds of cool things with, right? We can borrow against it. We could borrow against those physical assets to do even more sort of cautious, mindful investing in the people that we see in the ecosystem that are well positioned for growth. And that, I think, wraps up my boringness for the night. We need to, as a community, tackle these kind of big issues. And Mike's going to shut the live stream off here in a minute, and then we're going to go get some like blue poster paper, and I'm going to ask you guys to clump up in groups of 5 or whatever and think about some of these big issues. You know, what is vesting? Who's already vested in the system? Who's already done enough in-kind service or has paid enough capital into the system? Because you all pay membership fees, right? Right? You're all paying monthly membership fees, right? Right? So that's got to count for something. And what does that mean, right? So all of these things, voting, distributions, maintaining of membership, how do we set the rules? How do we inch this forward and iterate on it? Thank you to all who have watched the live stream. Thanks to Sorgatron Media for running the live stream tonight. And if you guys want to engage us out on the internet and be part of this in a more active way, please reach out via email, right? That's probably the best way. But email Jason or Adam or something. Don't email me. Way too many emails. I don't really want to give my email address because then people will actually email me. Oh, J Phillips at workhardpittsburgh.com. Yeah, email Jason. One L and Phillips. Don't email me. I get too many emails.